Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all in the room to the meeting of the Norfolk Countywide Community Safety Partnership Scrutiny Sub-Panel. And I'll quickly go over some general housekeeping for the meeting. First of all, the meeting obviously is being held live here in person at County Hall, but is also being live streamed to those watching. Gavin? Whoever's watching live. And just remind folks of that. The fire alarm test is not expected during the meeting, but if the alarm does sound, obviously we have to evacuate straight away. In the event of an emergency, please make your way to the nearest exit, and the muster point for us is located in the main car park out the front. Under the Council's protocol for use of media equipment at meetings held in public, this meeting may be filmed, recorded or photographed by anyone present, but we need to be clearly visible, and wishes of any individual not to be recorded or filmed must be respected. We haven't got any public in. May I also ask councillors to keep to the agenda and important items that we need to debate, and reserve my right to draw debates to a close where councillors are straying from matters in hand into promotion of political groups or parties. We are obviously in election period. So moving on to the agenda proper, the first item is to receive apologies from absence, and I'll go to Megan for those, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies today from Councillor Tristan Ashby and his substitute Councillor Helen Crane, Councillor Stuart Dark and his substitute Councillor Michael Shenery, and apologies from Councillor David Bills. Thank
you. Next item is the minutes of the sub-panel meeting held back on the 19th of January. Am I okay to sign those as a true and accurate record? Oh, James, you've got a query or a point to raise.
My query relates to a very good debate we had on the fraud overview and update. But if you look at section 5.3.1, I was the member who raised that question. And in the very last line, it says, a follow-up directly with the member to understand local circumstances was offered. It's never happened. And then if you look at 5.34, it was we said we would distribute eye-catching awareness. It's turned up today.
It has turned up today, yes.
It will start to be delivered tonight.
Excellent.
That's it.
That's good to know that that action has been carried out and sorted. And I've got back behind, and everyone here should have one, so that's good. Excellent. So other than that, I can sign them as a true and accurate record of the meeting. Next item is for members to declare any interests. We don't normally have any. No, that's okay. I have no particular updates from myself as chair, so I'll move straight on to our first substantive item of business, and that is an update on the Road Safety Partnership activity in Norfolk. The item starts on page 10 of our agendas, and thank the partnership for the report. Who's presenting? Gavin, starting us off, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I've kind of volunteered myself to just give the opening in relation to the report, if that's okay. Just give a little bit of background, and then we can open up. So in terms of myself, I sit on the Road Safety Partnership Operational Group, with a lot of my colleagues here today who sit on the operational group. I thought it'd be useful, so we've come today to present the report on behalf of the partnership and to ask any questions that may arise to a range of different organisations relating to different aspects of the report and the safe system approach that's set out. Probably just worth saying, so in terms of the Road Safety Partnership itself, the strategic partnership, that is comprised of, I think, seven representatives. And I just thought it would be useful just to set out who they are. So first and foremost, it's Public Health from Norfolk County Council. It's the Fire and Rescue Services, no surprise, and we've got colleagues from Fire and Rescue Service. It's Norfolk Constabulary. It's the OPCC. It is the PCC. The ambulance service and highways, basically. So they are the seven organisations that make up the strategic group. Okay, And this group is part of the operational group that support that strategic group in terms of developing that strategy, the work plan, and just the wider work of the strategic group. So I wanted to set that out, if I could. I think that's kind of probably helpful to get across. I think so. In addition to that, this report sets out, say, progress against the strategy. It's at it's a strategic level because it's a report on the actual partnership, its strategic intent and the detail that comes with that, and the vaster range of activity that gets undertaken through the partnership, through different organisations to deliver that. If I could, I just wanted to also pick up, if it would be okay, on the question that arose during the Police and Crime panel this morning from the Vice Chair around data, because I think it's best just to kind of answer that question. She asked the question around, is analysis undertaken of when incidents and collisions happen, the time of the year, the time of the day, and so on and so forth. And the answer to that is yes. There are actions around the data group and developing the data, the analytics that we utilise. But in terms of that question, the answer is yes. I chair the subgroup, which is the data subgroup. And I think, as the PCC said, there is a vast amount of data, but we are also doing significantly more work with colleagues who manage different data assets to bring that together, to take the analytics further and to inform all our work, whether that is kind of at strategic level or in terms of developing particular projects or communication campaigns and so on. So yes, it does exist, and that is how that is undertaken. Some work to do still. We don't have a dedicated analytical resource to undertake that, so we're kind of having to beg, steal and borrow, but basically look where we can get buy-in from the existing resource base. But at the minute, we have just got a little bit of resource to really drive that work and really kind of take that forward. So I think that was it in terms of an introduction. The report itself is set out in terms of the safe system approach. Within the strategic partnership and the operational group, individuals from different organisations are leads for different pillars of the safe system. There's a lot of detail in the report in terms of activity. I think clear to say there is some data in terms of trends around KSI. Again, from a partnership point of view, from the point of view of the operational group, we are obviously more than aware of those trends. They are analysed at depth and on a continuous basis and trying to understand them. And I think probably worth pointing out that the strategy itself and the work plan is in response to that data. So it isn't in response maybe to, you won't see individual roads, individual junctions set out in this report. This is a strategic report. But what this is, though, is a set of work across all of those pillars, basically, to address those kind of key statistics. And finally, I suppose, just to kind of set out, we can't really answer questions around specific and individual junctions or roads or particular events that have happened, but what we can do is give advice where actually incidents and concerns should and could be raised, so they are taken forward and responded to in the appropriate way. So I think, though I plan to give an overview of the report, it's long and detailed. I think it's just a case of being, opening up to any questions that members of the panel have that we can, either further elucidate on or provide information if more detail is required outside of the meeting.
Thank you, Gavin. Anyone specifically from the rest of the team want to add anything at this point, or are you happy to take questions following Gavin's introduction? All okay? Yeah. Okay. So, members, we've asked, but this came back to us following the, I think it was probably nearly 12 months ago that we had an update last time. Questions, comments? Councillor Sands, I've spotted you first, and then I've got Vice Chair next.
Pardon me. Thank you, Chair. It's good to see a lot of mention of cyclists and motorcyclists in there. I think we'll all agree we've seen cyclists cycling at night with no helmet, no lights, dark clothing, which is a problem. We also know the police are taking action on people with electric bikes who change the setting so they get extra power from them, and I know there's been a programme in relation to that. When it comes to motorcyclists, I saw probably one of the most horrific sights I've seen on the road in a long time over the weekend. Just over this weekend, 3 young motorcyclists, all 125cc bikes, riding relatively safely, but 2 male riders had jackets and thick trousers on, But the third bike, which is a female rider, she had trousers on, but she had literally a sleeveless top, nothing covering her shoulders whatsoever. So are there any moves to promote correct attire, shall we say, for people riding motorbikes? Because if she came off her bike, she would have lost an awful lot of skin on the road.
I can come in on that one. Our colleague in Norfolk Fire and Rescue, we're looking at a motorcycle campaign this year, and part of that campaign will be covering PPE, so safe use of PPE, helmets, and the wearing and shoes as well. So that's happening this year. So we're working with Fire and the rest of the partnership to look at that piece specifically.
Yeah, I had a colleague when I was at school who came off a scooter, 125 scooter, and what they had to do to his kneecaps, because he was only wearing shorts, you know, was, yeah, quite horrific. So, you know, prevention is better than cure, and proper attire is definitely what's required. Councillor Sands touched on these electric bicycles that seem to be able to go at huge speeds without being pedalled. Are they illegal for use on the roads, do we know? And is there a particular clamp down on them? I know scooters, apart from the licensed ones within Norwich, and the e-bikes within Norwich are obviously allowed to be used. The ones that are pedal assisted are fine, but I mean, I've witnessed, I had a parish council complaining about some youngsters who were just zipping up and down on something that needed no pedalling at all, and I witnessed it myself while I was out and about in another village, a separate village, and the speed that this particular machine was travelling would have definitely set off the SAM2s as being too fast for the road. Are they illegal, and what are we doing about those, please?
Firstly, there's a late apology from our roads policing colleagues who were supposed to be here today. So Superintendent Sally Hamilton was due to be on the panel today. Yes. This is going to sound like I'm dropping a shoulder here, but I'm representing the police, but I'm from the Central Ticket Office side. So right. My knowledge of the kind of legislation in relation to electric bikes is not where it should be, probably. What I can do, though, Chair, is take that away, yes. and I'll speak to colleagues around. I know it's an area of real interest in amongst our RAPT colleagues. I'll take that away and get a proper response back to you. I
think that information would be helpful, not least that we can disseminate it out to, you know, all the district council colleagues, county councillors, all the parish councils, and actually if there is incidences of youngsters tearing around on them and they're not making any effort to pedal at all, in other words they've been altered in some way, if there is a legal issue there, you know, it's much better that they get pinched and the thing gets taken off them than it is have them in a crash. I mean, the one that I saw was wearing a bicycle helmet. The speed he was doing, I would have thought a full-face motorbike helmet and leathers would have been more appropriate. But yeah, okay. Thank you for that. Alex, yeah, please.
Yeah, just come in just as from an NCC Highways point of view, attends a road safety operational group. It has been a subject that has been mentioned within that group over the past year with our police colleagues in attendance, and they have been carrying out some activity to enforce, but as my colleague from the Criminal Justice Service mentioned, the legislation is still playing catch up in a lot of places, and there has been some local to national press coverage recently on plans of national government to tighten up the legislation around electric bikes in particular. So it's something the Road Safety Operational Group are very aware of. And we can continue to support that, applying the Safe Systems approach through the following year. Thank you.
That's helpful, and the information, when received, I think we'll make sure it gets disseminated out as wide as we can, so that people locally have got the knowledge. So I've got Sarah next, Councillor Buttercofer, and then I've got Sue. I just noticed as well. Sarah.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, you said you were from the constabulary. I have a question for you, but you might not be, in the most polite possible way, you might not be able to answer. So if you have a speed watch group in a town, you know, using their speed guns and things, what and they get persistent offenders at certain times of day, what would you expect or hope the response from the constabulary would be to that if they're reporting?
Hi, yeah, so I'll take that one. What would normally happen is we get feedback through the teams, community speedwatch groups, or sometimes some of the SAM data, we do the same process for.
Yep.
We would send some of our team out or put our own SDR out. So it collects data. So it would be over 7 days. Then we'd use that to decide if a site needs looking at or what options are around next and how we enforce there.
Could we please speak at the end of the meeting, because I have a group that have been trying and have got plenty of data, SAM2 data and their own personal data from collecting.
Yep.
And they haven't had a visit and they're getting a little grumpy.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We can catch up at the end.
Lovely, thank you very much. And I think that's, you know, the main thing. And the other thing I wanted to ask, I mean, I know people moan about the surfaces of our roads in Norfolk, but actually I travel quite a bit for my work, and boy was it scary when I went down to Stratford-upon-Avon last week, or the week before, going across the country, some of the roads. And the potholes, how long does it normally take us to get a pothole filled in Norfolk? Because I was actually having to take evasive action, otherwise I would have taken one of my tyres out, and so were other drivers. And I was thinking, it is a miracle there is no accident here. And I thought, actually, we're pretty good at this. We ought to shout about this more.
Alex or Jeremy?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. So we have the Transport Asset Management Plan that sets out our approach. So our approach isn't uniform. It would depend on the individual circumstance. So that could be the size and the depth of a pothole, but also the location of it. So we take a risk-based approach to dealing with potholes. We do have a very good reputation nationally for our approach, both from national statistics, but also the public perception, I think, is what you're reflecting yourself. Our approach is very much try and get into preventative measures where we can, but it is a huge challenge with our maintenance budgets as they are. It's very constrained, so there are occasions where, you know, we do struggle to keep up with resources, but you know, the risk-based approach is a nationally recognised way of dealing with it, and it's good to hear that you can see that in Norfolk it is better than in other counties.
Absolutely. I mean, my concern really is on rural roads where it's dark. I mean, this time of the year we're going into now, it's obviously, you know, you can see the problem, but during the winter months, you know, it can be really, really difficult and dangerous for cyclists and motorcyclists in particular. I mean, if a motorist gets a pothole, gets a flat tyre, well, they get a flat tyre, but it can have major consequences, as you guys know, for cyclists and motorcyclists. And I suppose it's the big potholes I'm talking about. We all know about the little ones that aren't pretty, but they don't do any damage or won't hurt anyone.
I mean, you will appreciate Norfolk is one of the largest highway networks in the country. So that is a big challenge for us, is understanding where those potholes are. So we do have an online report form, which we encourage everyone to use and report. Then they go straight to the area teams for inspection and resolution. So we actually, you know, we actively encourage everyone to use that report form, so to help us target resources where it's needed the most.
Thank you. And yeah, I agree with you, everyone. It's not difficult to use that tool. I do encourage it at parish council meetings and things. So thank you.
Yes, it's awfully frustrating to get to a monthly parish council meeting for somebody to say, oh yes, I saw that on the way home from last month's parish meeting and I thought I'd better raise it with you as parish clerk for you to raise it. You just need to log these things online so they get attended to. You know, it's, yes, and all manner of safety issues. I've heard that said at meetings in the past. Sue, I've got you next. Councillor Catchpole.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, really. The first is on page 21 of our agenda, which is 3.5.5, the system-led intelligence improvement. Partners are committed to improving the collection and integration of local intelligence to strengthen system-wide decision-making. Do you think somebody could explain that to me, please, and just expand on it? That would be lovely, thanks.
Yeah, I can come in and probably bring in my colleague Nicole. So we've set up a speed subgroup, and a lot of data and intelligence come through that speed subgroup. So from councillors, members of the public, the data. But Nicole, I don't know if you want to pick that one up and put more detail and meat on the bones on that.
Yes, all the information that comes in, whether that might go to tasking groups, so to local officers, so if we can't enforce. So it's all about that sharing complaints, information, troublesome areas alongside. But the speed subgroup's recent. It's only been set up in the last 6 months, and we've only done 2 groups so far. So we're still trying to find our feet how we share that information the best. And the data group will feed into that as well.
Can I just add something to that as well? So I think one of the important things that's happened over the last few months is kind of closing the loop on all of this. So Nicole ventured a variety of different ways that information can come into us, and we're working hard as a partnership to make sure that we don't duplicate our efforts, that we have a more coordinated response. So as an example, when we have concerns may come from a community, may come from a parish council meeting, wherever that information comes from, it comes into that subgroup, and then it will be fed out. And we've started in the police, we now have an internal tasking meeting, because what we used to have is because Nicole and I represent the kind of the civilian mobile safety camera operations, and that used to work quite independently from the roads policing team. So what happens now is we have a monthly tasking meeting where the information from the speed subgroup and other sources is fed into that tasking group, and then we can have a much more coordinated approach in terms of our internal resources as well. And that's just an example of how we're starting to arrive at a place where we haven't got this kind of scattergun approach to data coming in. We've got a much more driven, focused approach in line with safe systems and bringing KSIs down. We're not, we're not there yet in terms of fully completing that work, but we now have a much better understanding, I think, of where we're headed.
So just on that point, so is the aim to find hotspots and then act on them?
I wouldn't use the term hotspots. What I would say is that what we want to do is make sure that we have a proper coordinated approach, particularly to community concerns. So whereas in the past you might have several members of a community maybe reporting concerns about speed, and maybe their local MP through the parish council direct to the police. So there might be a number of reports about the same thing kind of existing, and lots of different people working on them. What we want to try and do is draw that together. So rather than to say that we look for hotspots, what we would say is if a community, for example, reports speeding in a village, okay, what we want to do is make sure that we have a coordinated response to that. So we go out, put the SDRs out. Have we actually got a problem, or is this a perception issue? And are there different ways that we can deal with that as a partnership in terms of resolving it? So I think it is more about where there's a concern, let's look at it in depth. Let's collect the data. Let's make an informed decision, because we've got limited resources. We've got 6,000 miles of road in Norfolk, and in our safety camera team we've got 8 people. So we've got to be really kind of measured and evidence-led, but at the same time try and reassure communities that we're actually addressing their concerns and trying to improve road safety.
Thank you. Jade, please. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question in regards to the partnership approaches in Norfolk. I'm not sure who can answer this for me, because this is quite a broad view. But how much influence does resident consultations, focus groups actually have on decisions made? And the reason I highlight this is because there's been recent projects in Yarmouth and Galston, where I'm from, that's caused great upset and has actually in turn led to misuse of the cycle lanes and the parking, despite the original intentions of the scheme. And the residents were actually left feeling very unheard and misunderstood. So it'd just be nice, because there's obviously a whole section on here about being led by community engagement and insight. How much influence does this actually have in the decisions that are made?
I can give it from my perspective. So I'm in road safety, the behaviour change education. So we do a lot of focus groups with schools. We have focus groups with parents, and we do focus groups with those that engage with our all of our work and work programmes that we do. So we get the feedback through that way, and that then informs our future work. But I think for other areas of the business, that will be slightly different. But from our point of view, if we do get complaints in through all different ways, we will then feed it back into the partnership. And I think there was a conversation last time around snap meetings. So a lot of useful intelligence come through those snap meetings from the police that also come into the partnership. And I think that in highways, you'd have very similar conversations with members of the public. So do you want to pick that point up, Alex? Thank you.
Yes, I mean, it's important to recognise that the primary objective of the road safety partnership is to reduce killed and seriously injured. So we pair information received from the public with other data sets. So the police, the data collected by the police on injury collisions. That said, there's many other avenues to get support. So we have a dedicated highway engineer covering each specific area who really understand local issues. So, for example, we have the Parish Partnership Scheme. We also have a local member fund as well, which are other avenues which are designed to address local community concerns. So I would definitely encourage you to speak to your local highway engineer if you haven't, and I'm very happy to help signpost if that's needed. So it's important to recognise that within the partnership, that's our role, is to feed in what we are doing. But there are other aspects, that we can certainly help with.
Yeah, can I just come back?
Yeah, of course.
It's just because as well, obviously, there was a lot of against for these specific projects, and then I suppose the afterwards is obviously there is issues around safety. It's about trying to reassure the public that this is the reason for this, but it kind of felt like the two projects in Yarmouth and Galston were done, and then it was like done and dusted, this is what's happening. And I think it's really important afterwards to kind of repair that relationship, to say, we understand your views, but this is the reason why this has been installed. Because it just felt as if there was a budget, the money needed to be spent, this is why we're doing it, and not actually fully explaining the reasons behind it. So especially with the focus on community engagement and insight and trying to keep that relationship going, there's definitely a thought about the aftercare afterwards.
Jeremy?
Are you referring to the Middleton Road? Yeah, okay. Angelico, yeah. So, yeah, I think what you've highlighted is probably the communication side. We do communicate with every scheme, and we try and understand what people feel about the proposal. Often those who don't like the proposal are the ones who shout the loudest, and the ones who actually support the proposal tend to not get their voices heard. I think, as has already been said, the main priority of those schemes was to improve the safety for the most vulnerable users. And some of the comments that have been made in the media were saying, well, this is a really, really busy road. You don't need to add cycle lanes on there. The main reason we put the cycle lanes on there is because it is a really busy road. So the reason for it has almost been answered in the argument, if you like. So yes, we have had some issues with people parking in the cycle lanes. Clearly, that is not how the new layout is to be used. But unfortunately, when we have to change the network to try and add the safety in for vulnerable users, there's a knock-on implication of that, and we're trying to sort of balance the loss of parking with the increased safety. So I take your point about the communication. Maybe we didn't major enough on the safety reasons. In some ways, the more that we almost respond to those types of comments, the more the shouting is coming back the other way. So we have to sort of try and find the right balance with these things. That scheme wasn't just money that was left over. You know, that was carefully planned. It was in a programme. It had been audited by Active Travel England. It was felt the most appropriate scheme to deliver. So it wasn't a case of let's just get some funding out the door. So really good feedback there. Unfortunately, a lot of what we do is played out in the public domain, and I think what we're finding with those two schemes is a case of that. I'd hope that once the network settles down, everyone will realise that those schemes have been really helpful. You know, the photographs that I've seen in the media show people cycling in the lanes, particularly family group cycling, which is exactly what we wanted. So yeah, we need to take away, I think, probably the communication bit, but it is really difficult trying to get the balance right.
Thank you, Jane. Sue, can I come to you next, please?
Thank you, Chair. A question about mobility scooters. Perhaps not so in Norwich, but in towns like Aylsham, where the pavements are just not wide enough, the mobility scooters are pushed onto the roads. I'm not even sure about the legality of that, but is there any investigation being done about the safe use of mobility scooters, and is there any guidance available for users about how to get around, basically, in smaller places where we don't have pavements?
It's amazing. I done some publicity for the King's Lynn mobility scheme and went out on one of their hire scooters with a colleague of mine at the time, and it's amazing how difficult it is that people almost treat you as though you're not there. And of course, they don't have brakes. You just have to ease off them and then they stop. But yeah, I think that when you first get one, you really seriously need to understand how they work and actually where they're safe to take and where they're not safe to take. But I'm sure we've got some input from colleagues about mobility scooters. Jeremy, please.
Yes, so government has just launched a consultation on mobility scooters. I think primarily because there is a lot of, I think there's about 4 different tiers of mobility scooter that you can have, right through from the sort of small ones that you can fold up and put in the boot of your car, right up to what looks like, you know, a very significant piece of machinery that looks more akin to a small car than a mobility scooter. So lots of questions were asked in that consultation around minimum ages, the speed. So they're looking to find a better balance, I think, with the speed of what speed that these can go at, whether you can carry passengers or not. So it's clear that government are taking it very seriously and are trying to simplify, I think, what the legislation is around mobility scooters. But we know that they are really important for those who need them. I mean, one of the comments that we made was around the minimum age for mobility scooters, and they were suggesting it could be 16 or even 18 years of age. But then, if you think about it, some of the users of the mobility scooters are people going to school. And we shouldn't forget that we have mobility scooter users who go to school. And it would be nice if the person was able to travel independently to school when they go to high school. So that could be from young as year 7. So we were trying to make it clear that it's not just elderly people and others, you know, who are using mobility scooters. Almost anybody in society could want to use them. So we were trying to respond in the fairest possible way. I think there's been questions, can they go in cycle lanes? Can they go on footways? I think in most cases the user will need to go and the part of the network that they feel safest in, if I'm honest, and some will automatically go in the road and will feel most comfortable there. But I don't know the specific ins and outs as to who's allowed where, but what I do know is that there is quite a bit of focus on it at the moment, and hopefully that will bring some clarity for everybody as to how mobility scooters can be best used and we can accommodate them. So, yeah.
I know from my own experience of them, sloped driveways up to people's properties and the undulations caused by raised and lowered curbs, obviously, if you're going along a path, yeah, definitely don't go too quick. Our role here is obviously to scrutinise the work that you... Oh, sorry, Mike, have I missed your hand? I'm sorry, I'll come back to you.
No, that's
Mike,
all right, fine. Sort of related to mobility scooters, I suppose, but I saw one of the strangest vehicles I've ever seen on the road just a few days ago. It was a Citroen Ami car, or Ami car, and I was so curious about it, I looked them up when I got home, and it seemed to imply online that they could be driven by anyone over the age of 16 without a driver's licence. And yet this thing was in the traffic, sort of zooming along. So is there any regulation or anything that's going to govern these sorts of vehicles, which I suspect might become more common as different manufacturers start to produce them?
I think they're identified as a quadricycle, I think is the word they use.
So I think this comes back to the point we were making earlier, that it's a fast-moving society. You know, in the last 5 years, there's been an explosion of different types of vehicles, including e-scooters, for example, and legislation is playing catch-up. What we are recognising is that, well, what we would class as vulnerable road users in this category. So more historically, that has meant pedestrians and people on bikes, but that's a growing category and is something within the data that we see as is an area that needs support from the safe systems approach. So that's an area of focus within the road safety group. So I'm going to ask my colleague Laura, I'm hoping will be able to talk about some of the campaigns that we have done recently.
Yeah, probably not to this point, but there are some other things that we're doing. So we've done some older driver campaigns, so Drive Safe, that Councillor Wymark was involved in recently. But we do need to improve in this particular area. I know we haven't got our colleagues here from the police who focus on the safe road vehicles part, so I can't answer the point directly, but we have got some other campaigns around stay focused. And that's with any vehicle that we use. So whether it's whether you're a pedestrian, a driver or a rider, it's how you keep focused all the time as well. And I mentioned the motorcycle campaign that we've got coming up, and we've also got a planned campaign around vulnerable road users in the autumn. So we can add those key features back into those campaigns.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, very valid point. I mean, they do about nearly 40 miles an hour. Believe it or not.
I don't know the speed, but I suppose they have insurance implications.
Yeah, they absolutely need to be insured to be used on the road, don't they? Our role in all of this is to try and keep the Norfolk public safe and try and reduce these figures that we get year on year. And we were looking earlier with the Police and Crime Commissioner at the numbers of killed and seriously injured. Last 12 months showed a slight increase over the year before, which is not helpful. I've raised the point, we've got some fair chunks of section of the main trunk roads now with across the A47 with average speed cameras over stretches. We've got quite a lot of work going on putting dual carriageways in where there is average speed cameras over quite long sections where the work's taking place. So the main roads are being better controlled probably than they were previously. Where they're constructing dual carriageway, I think statistically dual carriageways and motorways are safer than some of the country roads and so on. We've done a lot with parish partnership schemes were mentioned, but local member funds, where there's been SAM2 speed signs, there's been various other, safety measures put in. So we've done all this raft of things. I think as I drive on certain roads, you regularly see the sort of think bike signs and you think, yeah, this is a regular route, perhaps from King's Lynn to Hunstanton coast, around the coast road. People go and enjoy those roads on their bikes. Hopefully we're in the right equipment. but, so other motorists and things are aware that's a route that bikes use. So we're doing all these things, but the stats still keep beating us. And I just wonder what the next step can be, how we can move forward in such a way that we start to see a reduction, because everyone tells me that cars are safer than they were when I was a child, when you didn't even have to wear seatbelts in the back. And all the cars are airbagged and all this, that and the other. We noticed a mixture of those that are getting injured, cyclists, motorcycles, etc. We know that it's speed. We know some of them are allied to drink and drug abuse. We know that there's a purge on those with no insurance and as a often result, no MOT and defective vehicles. So we know all that's going on, but stats just don't improve. And I just wondered how we can ever get to a point where we make Norfolk that bit safer place. And actually, whether it would be time to start using some of the parish partnership money for more practical speed measures. I mean, I put a speed gate in one of my villages so that you're coming into the village, you've got to give way to people coming out of the village, and the people coming out of the village invariably aren't going as quick as the ones coming in. So, that's a sort of physical measure. I mean, have we got enough speed awareness, SAM cameras and the other? Is it time to start thinking a bit differently? I'm looking to highways for some guidance, please. Alex.
Yeah, well, the parish partnership scheme is a very broad scheme. So all of the types of the schemes that will be considered and listed on the website. So we do encourage communities to look at that to understand, because it does go beyond just SAMT signs, different types of traffic calming measures. You might remember in recent years we had the £1 million Road Safety Community Fund as well, which was community-led, it was member-led, so it very much what local communities wanted to see. In regards to the increase in the fatality in this areas, that Gav mentioned about the sort of data group, and that's something we're continuing to explore. It's a very difficult picture to unpick, just simply because there's so many different factors that could be contributing to that. Some of that we think is data quality, which is mentioned in the paper, and there's been recent changes in the Department for Transport's reporting guidelines around that. But we also do have an increase in year on year on the number of vehicles on our road. So naturally that will result in more fatal and serious accidents, and we're trying to suppress that as much as possible. I do want to mention the fatal review panel that's recently been set up, that's in the paper. It's been incredibly powerful as a group to get together. We sit in a room every 3 months with representatives from all parts of the partnership, and each fatality is discussed in sometimes in great depth to really understand as a group how we can prevent future accidents from happening. So I'm very grateful to the colleagues in this room who contribute to that panel. One thing that is quite sort of key that we identified in last year's fatalities is the number of medical episodes. Actually there were no other factors that were identified in those accidents other than the health of the driver themselves. So that's sort of the key focus over the next year, is to look at how we can help support that as a partnership, working with NHS colleagues, the ambulance service as well, to try and reduce that impact longer term.
Yeah, I know that it's not just young drivers, it's older drivers, it's people with, failing eyesight, and the fact that you're drilling down and finding the detail behind each of those cases, I think is really a positive, because otherwise we don't learn whether it was defective road, defective eyesight, they were 2.5 times the legal driving limit, whatever it might be. And actually by doing that, I think we get a better understanding of how we need to focus what we do to try and prevent. Because if we've got lots of one thing, we'll have a go at the, have a go at the numbers, pick off the biggest ones with the easiest win. But whether you're, you know, the hard nut to crack is the driver who thinks, as they, well, I think we all do, pass a test at whatever age, and then don't do any other training or anything else until we perhaps end up on a speed awareness course, or, you know, perhaps go through a driving history thinking everything's fine and perfect and dandy, and sometimes it isn't. And I don't know how you quite get through to those folk, because they, you know, go along in ignorance of the fact that they may cause a problem, thinking that everything's okay still, and it perhaps isn't. And, you know, as we all move on in years, that's something perhaps we need to raise more awareness of. And I know the government are looking at some extra testing for health and things on driving licences, which I think should be welcomed. Right, any further questions, comments for the team? No? Are there any specific recommendations that we have as a panel for them? Don't think we have. So I thank you all for here on this item. It's a tough nut to crack, and you know, please carry on doing the good work that you're doing, because it's, you know, you're all part of the same picture, and if we can avoid a few call-outs for Norfolk Fire and Rescue and the ambulance service and the police to have to end up dealing with some of these, that's so much the better. Thank you. Right, we shall then move on to page 28 of our agenda, which is the domestic abuse, sexual violence, stalking and harassment. Yeah, those present for the for road safety, by all means, please, yeah, please do leave if you wish to. But thank you all for attending. So item 6 is the opportunity for us to consider the partnership strategic and operational response to domestic abuse, sexual violence, stalking and harassment. And it's Liam who's presenting this report. Over to you, please, Liam.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take a quick canter through the domestic abuse and sexual violence report and then open it up for questions. I think the report attempts to, or does set a really clear definition of domestic abuse, sexual violence and sexual harassment, what they are, and also kind of what they mean in a bit more detail for the panel. One of the really key messages that I wanted to pick out of that is around the messaging about why we in Norfolk don't use the term violence against women and girls or VAWG. I think the really key point to pick out is that the domestic abuse, sexual violence, harassment are deeply gendered crimes and incidents, but the fact is that men are also significantly affected by these issues. So it's kind of needing to have a recognition of that factor too, whilst being very aware that it is a deeply gendered issue. So it's a complicated message to try and communicate. What I wanted to flag was some of the key statistics from the report that show we've estimated, based on national statistics, that there are about 155,000 people who experience domestic abuse in their life, and 36,000 in the most recent years, and that's in Norfolk. So as a proportion of about 900,000 people that live in Norfolk, it's a really substantial cohort, and that's based on the Crime Survey of England and Wales data. Similarly, we've estimated that 145,000 people in Norfolk are thought to have experienced sexual violence. Again, a really substantial figure, and that's made up of children who are victims of sexual violence as well as adults. And then for stalking and harassment, we've pulled out that national data suggests that 1 in 7 people are victims of stalking or harassment within their life. So clearly, sadly, there are deep impacts that these types of crimes have on the victims. We've described some of the physical, psychological factors that that occur. In particular, I wanted to pull out the association that has been more recently acknowledged with suicides. We've seen recent cases in the news elsewhere in the country in relation to criminal convictions and the perpetration of domestic abuse around suicide. That is something that we are responding to in a much more coherent way, following those kind of that identification. There's also been associated things like addiction, offending, and the livelihood. So thinking about housing. A really important factor to pull out is the impact that, in particular, in the report is talking about domestic abuse in this case, but all of these crime types have a significant impact on children. So where a child grows up in a household where the domestic abuse occurs, some of the kind of empirically identified issues that they might experience have been just a few. There's a longer list, but anxiety and depression has been highlighted, sleeplessness and nightmares, and then also more kind of developmental issues, so delayed or deterioration in speech. So some really quite striking impacts on children so that we've been keen to ensure our approach responds to. Obviously, the Domestic Abuse Act from 2021 understands that children are victims of domestic abuse in their own right. So that's a really important issue. The report also pulls out some of the barriers that different groups face in terms of accessing support or coming forward to report their experience. So we've identified sexuality, gender, ethnic minorities, adults with care and support needs, and older adults all face different barriers that can influence their ability to come forward. And again, we make sure that services are aware of that and looking to respond to it. One of the most prominent developments in this area in recent times is the government's Freedom from Violence and Abuse strategy, which was published in December last year. It sets a really clear direction, but it's also a very robust direction. It's a very, very large-scale document of commitments that will be delivered over the term of the government, but it's really clear in what it's trying to achieve. It's trying to achieve prevention of abuse. It's looking to pursue perpetrators, and it's looking to make sure that survivors and victims are supported appropriately. So that's a really important driver of what's coming in the next few years in this space. So what do we do locally about this as part of the Community Safety Partnership? We have a multi-agency partnership group that we call DASVG, the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Group. It is made up of the Community Safety Partnership partners, so probation, local authorities, health, police, and our fire and rescue colleagues. So the full CSP, but we've got a wider net that we cast in relation to our partners. So we've ensured that the service providers, so the likes of Leeway and the Sue Lambert Trust, are part of that partnership, and that we've got a kind of a mechanism to make sure that all our partners can inform that. The partnership is currently chaired by the police, Superintendent Pippa Hines, who sent her apologies for not being here today to discuss this item with you. But it's a really coherent group with a strategy. This report sets out what we've been doing in response to that strategy over the past year. So we've got 5 key priorities within the strategy, and under each we've set out some of the activities that we've been doing over the last year in that space. But just to run through those priorities, first one is about improving the understanding within communities about domestic abuse, sexual violence, stalking, harassment. The second is around our workforce. What can we do to support our workforces to be able to respond more appropriately to the different different issues that we're discussing here? We, as a partnership, want to commit to improving our strategic understanding of domestic abuse, sexual violence, etc., as an issue, and we've got a multitude of ways listed within the report about how we'll do that. We've got a priority all around prevention and support. We take a public health approach to prevention, so have stratified it in that way. And then, as I've kind of alluded through the report, children are being affected by domestic abuse, sexual violence is a really important aspect of our response. So we've made sure that there's a priority specifically responding to that, and we have a partnership group that responds directly to that, and which is informed by the findings of the joint targeted area inspection. So thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Liam. I think within all of that, I mean, it's such a broad sphere. We must also not forget, and I'm always an exponent of it, and that is violence caused by children on parents. We know we talk about children often as being the victims involved in, you know, domestic abuse situations, but sometimes the children can perpetrate the violence on parents and guardians too. So it's a very broad sphere within which we operate, and to drive reduction, it's not easy. I'd looked within the stats that we had in our previous agenda at the solved stats for domestic abuse in Norfolk, and you normally know who the perpetrator is in a domestic situation and what the circumstances are, but the actual clean-up rates are not as good as shoplifting. And you sort of think to yourself, how can that be? But I would just suspect that it's because time after time, the police and other agencies are involved to help. And once the help has been given, the situation calms down and the person doesn't, you know, the victim doesn't want to press charges against those that have done them wrong. And we can all urge anyone in those situations to please think seriously, because the situation won't necessarily improve by itself. And intervention by various agencies is one thing, but we need, we need that backing from those being made into victims. Members, any comments, questions relating to the report? Start with Sue, please. Councillor Catchpole.
Thank you, Chair. Just one comment under 1.1, the wide-ranging consequences. I would have liked to have seen economic disadvantage included in a kind of definition of consequences of such situations. And then looking at 2.2 on page 34, with the statistics there for the level of can't say crimes, incidents. Is there an easy way for people to report anonymously incidents in other areas? We put Crime Stoppers as the suggested route, but is there somewhere that people can report anonymously and where offenders' names might then be tagged, and then if further reports were received, at least there'd be something already in the records. Is that sort of system already working? Thank you.
Yeah, Amanda, please.
I think in those circumstances, we would encourage individuals to come forward to get the help and the support that they need through our Norfolk and Suffolk Victim Care and or our NIDAS service as well. I think it's really important in the first instance to get them the right support so that they can, should they wish to, feel the confidence to come forward and make that report moving forwards. I understand your question, but I don't think at this moment in time, well, I'll take that away and we'll go and we'll bring that back. We'll look at an answer for you in that way. Yeah.
Okay. Mike, Councillor Sands, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So continuing on the theme of 2.2 and the number of victims and things, unfortunately, the press, in particular the EDP locally, they seem often to highlight certain sectors of the community as perpetrators, but when we look at the backgrounds of the people, it's not the people. I think most people probably realise I'm referring to people who live in asylum hotels being accused of the vast majority of these sorts of crimes across the county, not just across the county, but across the country. And unfortunately, the press just seems to perpetrate these fictions. And so how can we don't want to highlight, I think, certain sectors of the community as being, these are the perpetrators and these are not. But there has to be a point where the facts of the circumstances are highlighted, and the press needs to be made to take responsibility for misinformation or malinformation concerning reporting these things.
Difficult one. I'm looking to Amanda and Gavin. Who's going to pick that one up, Amanda?
I'm just going to look at this in the broad spectrum. So the Local Government Association has just produced some information about misinformation, disinformation and malinformation across the range of spectrum of all vulnerabilities. We have worked, Liam and colleagues have worked really hard with our partners and an organisation called Belong to make sure that we can make sure that information is there for our partner agencies to respond appropriately with whatever community safety issue that there is, so that they can make sure it's informed response as well, to ensure that communities are feeling safe as well. So there has been a lot of work done in the partnership, and that will continue moving forward as well. I don't know, Liam, if you wanted to add anything further into that, but it is quite significant work because we know that there is a and it is, I'm not going to look at the press, etc., but there is also social media, there is Facebook, TikTok, anything that can happen, Snapchat, where that information grows exponentially very quickly, and algorithms are very clever to move that forward. So hence why we've worked so quickly and swiftly with the LGA document as well.
And I can find this online?
Yes, you can, and your community safety partnership lead will be able to share that with you because it has been shared directly with them.
And just following on the flip side of that, the online bit, when we refer to stalking in this report, that's not just physical stalking following, that's online trolling and that kind of thing as well. That's all classed as stalking these days, yeah. Thank you. Liam, please. Yeah.
Yeah, just a couple of extra bits of context just to add on the back of what Amanda said, that she referenced Belong, the Belong network, so we've worked closely with them and Norwich City Council. They've been providing training sessions that have been accessible to some of our partner agencies on dis, malinformation. So there's a local training offer going in. Again, like Amanda referenced the LGA. The LGA are putting training packages in, which we've offered out to our partnership too. So it's much more of a pressing issue in society today, I think, and we're trying to influence all the levers we can in relation to that. And if there were to be any press articles that were highlighting factual inaccuracies, is relatively commonplace for the public sector organisations that are responsible for that to be flagging to the press organisation in question that there's an inaccuracy in what they're reporting.
We unfortunately live in a world where misinformation on on platforms is believed over and above what comes out of the official agencies. So it's a shameful situation, but that's where we're at. You're happy to believe it because I saw it on TikTok or whatever, Sarah, you want to come in, please?
Yes, very briefly. I'll send it to Becky so that she can send it to everyone, but this LGA information or course, they're now bringing out a course for councillors online, which is free for all members of member councils to attend online. And I've got the information on that, so I'll send it to Becky so she can send it to everyone.
Important to be circulated out to all current councillors, and as part of the induction for new councillors after the elections in May. So yeah, that's very, very positive. Jade, a question from you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just firstly, thank you ever so much for bringing this. And it's really a good to see all the initiatives that are in place and all the work that's being done, and especially to actually see about the work with children impacted by domestic violence. I don't know the answer to this, but something that really sadly sticks out for me, point 2.2, about that 5 in 6 women and 4 in 5 men do not report sexual assault due to various reasons: embarrassment, believing in that the police can't help, and fear of humiliation. I'm just thinking, what can we do to sort of change this? Because there's so much focus, obviously, afterwards, unfortunately, about the support for the victims. But we kind of need to... I don't know what the answer is, but we need to somehow tackle this, because the statistics are shocking that, you know, people don't feel able to come forward and then receive that support that they need and deserve. So I don't know what's been discussed in groups or the sort of approach that's going to be taken to try and tackle this, but I just had to mention this because them statistics is just as awful to read. Yeah.
How do we encourage that extra engagement, please?
So I think that the engagement is also about the pursuit of perpetrators. So the perpetrator work is really important in the partnership. And within the paper, you can see the work that has been done in relation to the domestic abuse perpetrator partnership approach. We're also going to be working with our police colleagues and looking at Home Office funding for drive intervention. Norfolk has been a mature partnership in relation to intervention for perpetrators, because it is about those high risk, high harm repeat perpetrators who are going from identifying those who are vulnerable and victimising. So actually we need to be addressing those individuals as a whole partnership, a whole system. It's not just about have they committed an offence this week, it's what are they doing, who are they engaging with. Can we look, let's have a look at their network. We will make those individuals safe, whether it be through Clare's Law or stalking prevention orders. Those are the work that the partnership are working together closely. You also have the CAPVA work with children and young people in the other scale of it. Children are not perpetrators of abuse. Children are acting out in their families, and that's also about support for that family and support for that child. And Chair, you know of the work that we do in relation to CAPVA, and we're very successful in Norfolk because as our partnership we built a sustainable model so that we're not reliant on external funding. We have received external funding for another 6 months from the Home Office, which we welcome, but that will also build resilience within our school environments, within our children's services environment, youth justice environment, so that we're looking at that that whole system approach, public health approach, from prevention right at the early stages all the way through to your high risk, high harm perpetrator intervention as well. And the perpetrator group is there to answer those questions. The lessons learned we learned from our domestic homicide reviews are coming into our perpetrator group as well. How will we as partners working together to prevent those perpetrators, to support and prevent those victims in the first instance as well? So I can, from that perspective, we are relentless in that work.
Yeah. Can I just come back?
Jade wants to come back in, then I've got Liam wanting to come in as well.
I suppose also it's about how do we address the shame that's attached to the embarrassment, because it's obviously good to work on the prevention work, but if unfortunately something happens and people don't feel able to report it because of the shame, I don't know how we tackle that, because that's obviously a massive issue, but I mean 40%, you know, that they don't feel able to talk about it, when actually we should be encouraging people to speak up. But no, thank you for that, Amanda.
And Liam?
So yes, absolutely. One scheme I really wanted to flag is Operation Soteria, which is a police-led operation. But the emphasis behind it is about improving confidence in the response that the police will provide, and looking to give more assurance of a positive outcome, I think is the phrase that the police would use, to an investigation. The early signs from what I understand is that there's an improvement being made from a relatively low base in terms of convictions, but that scheme is starting to change slightly. And I think your wider point about what do we do around improving confidence, that it's very much within the national strategy around prevention. Amanda touched on it a lot just now, but those prevention messages need to focus on the prevention messages can also focus on the shifting kind of maybe public perception that violence against women and girls, to use that phrase, is unacceptable. And those are kind of national messages I'm expecting to come out in campaign work, and will be ones that we echo locally. Locally, we do support the Susie Lampley Trust as well in their campaign around stopping street harassment. So we're promoting that, and that again pushes those, having gone on the course, it pushes those messages about what is unacceptable, and in my view should hopefully lead to some of the changes that you're talking about.
Thank you. Gavin, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to add up to Liam's point too, and I think there's something around our communications campaigns which has changed quite significantly over the last 2 or 3 years. I think just in terms of the approach, I think we really do kind of break down the audience, understand the kind of different needs of our different groups within our population. I think about, for example, our domestic abuse campaigns, particularly targeted campaigns at disabled people, for example, and certain vulnerability that goes with it, and the kind of consequence and really kind of addressing some of those, say, for example, those barriers or those reasons why people don't come forward either to report or to get the support. That's just one example. But we have now our campaigns are far more tailored to the audience. Obviously, all of our data work, we really understand kind of what victimisation looks like, perpetration looks like, and we know those audiences, but now we're really targeting them in terms of the messaging. So I think that's been significantly different. And I look at, although I think it sounds like you kind of referencing sexual violence, but I think about things like back on domestic abuse. I look at the NIDAS domestic abuse service, and look now, it's probably got the highest levels of self-referral that it's ever had, because I think actually what we've done is actually raise the profile through those campaigns, and it's ongoing and kind of consistent. And again, I think that approach is, it's recognised now. Although Liam talked about the national work, obviously people relate to local. They relate to their local environment, their local services, and again, so whilst that exists, we'll always supplement that, and we do that across a lot of our work, don't we? In terms of the whole of kind of the Community Safety Partnership, and Susie, who's our comms lead, is at the heart of that. So that's something to talk about. We don't know the answer. I think we do actually. I think not something we don't know the answer, but we know it's hard. But we do look at every single opportunity. I think about, again, male victims. We take a real a kind of a male-centered approach and look at what best practice looks like, and we feed that in.
Thank you. And back to Amanda, please. Yeah.
And with our evaluation, we use a lot of qualitative evaluation as well, listening to that victim voice. I think that's vitally important. We've just done some research with the University of East Anglia in relation to CATVA. So we're hearing that from why hasn't the parent come forward to get help and support? Why does the child feel that way? We're also doing that with our serious violence work, with our transition service, so that we have victims' voice at the heart of everything we do, and we can take that victim's voice into the partnership so they can understand why hasn't that person come forward. It's not, it's not about blaming them. It's not the right space and safe space for them at that moment in time. But that's a very small number of the services we provide that to. But I would say that There are services out there for anyone to come forward, and anyone who's either listening to this today or watching this later on or reviewing the notes and the minutes of this, there is help and support and guidance there to assist those individual victims. And we will make sure on our website we have help for victims of domestic and sexual abuse on our OPCC website, and that's local and national helplines as well.
Amanda, that's a very valid point. I've just been reminded of that by Becky, and what we'll make certain of is that within our minutes and link, and there'll be a link in there so that if anybody is a victim of domestic abuse or sexual abuse, that they'll have a way, if they've picked this up as being something we're talking about today, that they'll be able to access that information as a permanent link within our minutes. Any further questions or comments? I haven't seen any further hands. Oh, Gavin, back to yourself.
Chair, sorry, just on that point in terms of the information, I know on our website, as Amanda just pointed out, we have got all the information around support for victims of domestic abuse. I'd go a step further actually into their website and say there's a lot of information on there about victims of different types of crimes. We spoke this morning about hate crime, and if you go on our website again, there's a significant section on hate crime, what the county is doing to respond to hate crime, and also a wider range of resources. So I'd say actually go on there, actually, if you're looking for a wider range of support, regardless of what crime you've been a victim of.
That's really helpful information for everyone. So as I draw this, oh, hang on, have I missed? Sorry, Mike. Good job, my vice chair's watching.
It's me just recalling something back again. I thought it was in the papers here, but it must have been in this morning's papers. I can't find it, but there was an allusion to gatherings of children, and usually in city centres, and it's seen as a problem. I can't remember what the comment was because I can't find it again. But and it possibly relates to, children gather in places because they feel safe, and I was just wondering what work has been, because they were critical of children gathering in the hay area of the city, and I don't see that as a problem. I mean, we used to hang around when we were kids, didn't we, with our mates and whatnot. So is there anything in relation to this?
Amanda, please.
Working with our partners under the Serious Violence Duty Programme, we have been working for the past 3 years across the county, not just in those areas, but in across areas with our targeted youth our targeted youth prevention service as well. So that's about outreach work, it's about school work, and it's also about one-to-one work as well. And that's making sure any child or young person who may be on the periphery or preventing world in relation to any of serious violence. And if you have a look at our website, our full definition of serious violence, and it's a very, very big, large, broad scope. So we have been working with those children and young people. That's not just a standalone service, and at our previous meetings I've been able to bring the papers in relation to serious violence and the projects and the work that we are doing. In serious violence, so that's inclusive of your transition service, it's inclusive of the fire service working with TYSS in relation to mentoring and displaying that one-to-one support for young people of uniform services. It could be the training of our children and young people and talking to them through our youth services. So there is a multitude of ways we are working with young people, but also their parents, their carers, frontline workers, because again, it's another whole system approach. So there is work with all of our partners, and that's the statutory partners and also our third sector, charitable organisations, to ensure that if we identify any issues, we can dynamically respond to them.
Helpful. I'm with you, Mike. I think if the youngsters are around in groups, as long as they're safe and people are perhaps keeping an eye on, then that's so much the better than perhaps them being at home in a situation where they are in direct problem. There could be direct problems. So.
Can I just add something to that, if you don't mind? Everyone will be aware that the Australian government recently banned access to under 16-year-olds to social media. And there's been a couple of interesting corollaries to that I've come across recently. And that is, first of all, there's been a massive increase in sales of books, oddly enough. And also, where children were staying at home, spending time on screen, they're now going out and meeting with their mates, their friends, which can only be a good thing. And also, I think that also is a counter to the radicalisation that I made reference to this morning with active clubs and things. I think when kids get together, they, as a group, can see through some of the things that people come along and tell them, and they discuss it amongst themselves. They realise that people are trying to take advantage of them. They're not as silly as we think they are. They're very clued up. Certainly today's 15, 16-year-olds are far more switched on than when I was that age.
Yeah, and I won't go into party politics because we're not supposed to at this meeting, but you know, there is a drive to try and make that happen here as well with a social media ban. Didn't quite get as far as it was going, but there we are. Anyway, thanks very much for that. We bring this item to a close. I wondered if the partnership's got any recommendations, or panel has got any recommendations for the partnership. I'd definitely say keep up the good work. And are there any particular matters that we would request further information on? Anything that comes to mind? If not, we can always do it through the process of Becky as our support. Sorry, Sue, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to reiterate, I think the idea of giving people who may have been abused in some way an opportunity to explore whether the behaviour is or isn't a crime might also, if they could report anonymously, enable a lot more intelligence than not having that information. So I'd just like it to perhaps be looked at as to is our system that we have in place at the moment going far enough, or is there something else we could look to put in place that would just enable people to discover whether the behaviours are reportable or not, really.
Yeah.
It's probably
no,
that
I can see where you're coming
stage.
from. If something's happening to you through your domestic situation and you start questioning, is this normal? Am I in a bad place here? Is something bad happening to me? Actually, that advice, before you even think about it being a crime, you know, you've got to think about it, and how do you get that? And I think that's important. Susie, I think we call you Susie to your friends. We call
Just
you
to
Susie.
say, as part of the DASVER, we have the DASVER communications group, and that's actually the next campaign that we're going to look at in DASVER, is helping people understand what sexual offences are, non-contact sexual offences, so things like upskirting. Someone might not think that was a crime and they might not report, so we're going to try and do a bit of myth busting on that. So that is next on our agenda to look at and help people understand things in sort of non-contact and non-intimate stalking and things like that, so people can kind of understand what is and what isn't, as you've described. So that is coming.
Thank you. That's a very important consideration. So no request specifically for more information at the moment. So I think we note the report and thank you all again for that. That moves us on to page 42, which is our forward work programme. And I'll just get the 42 myself. Yeah, absolutely. The actual running of programme is on 45. Our next meeting scheduled for 29th of July. We have a report coming forward to us on antisocial behaviour case reviews. And also the partnership annual report. So we've already got some items for consideration at our next meeting. Any suggestions on items that we may look to consider at this point in time? I often go to Gavin to see if there's anything bubbling away that we need to be knowing about at the moment. Nothing springs to mind. Okay. Now, oh yes, absolutely, and I mustn't forget that as a result of, because our committee that we're aligned to at the County Council is the Adult Social Care and Public Health Committee. I did go along to their last meeting and present a report on what we'd been up to. Now, they did put a request in as a, after hearing what we do, they asked if there would be further work in relation to door-to-door scams and the effectiveness of no cold calling zones, and a report back on the outcomes of the Winter of Action activity, which are, we've kind of heard a little bit about the some of the effects of that, which have probably been in the result of the shoplifting and so on, but clean-up rate. So that's something that we need to, if we can, consider going forward. Actually, as a result of them asking me to go along and make that a report to the Adult Social Care Committee, I do find myself as a de facto first choice substitute for the Adult Social Care Committee. So I don't know what they're going to do going forward. We'll see what happens. So that's some items for consideration. And are there any items or requests that you wish to make to the Adult Social Care and Public Health Committee about our work? Councillor Sands.
Sorry, in relation to what you were just talking about, it might be worth also involving our own trading standards people, because they are very switched on as far as all of this sort of stuff goes. So it might be worth getting someone from them to come along and make some commentary as well. Because I know over the last, I don't know how many years, I've often contacted trading standards over various things and found them more than helpful. We have a really, really good trading standards department here in County Hall.
Indeed we do. Peter, please.
Members may or may not be aware, but by coincidence, trading standards moved in to sit as part of public health from the 1st of April. So obviously, pending changes that might occur to the committee structure from local election, my expectation is that it would come under the sort of remit of that particular select committee if the structure stays as it is today, in any event by coincidence. So that'll bring some alignment there.
Those scams are, those scams and things. We're looking to prevent people from the harm that causes. So I'm sure that committee will take an interest in it, both on a public health point of view, the fact that it's in that department. But I think we would look to also have some of that information.
Just as a humorous aside, for anyone who has contact with trading standards people, if they know of any of the longer standing members of trading standards, get them to relate to you the raccoon story, which is a true story which involves County Hall. It's absolutely hilarious.
I think we'll save that one for another day, Councillor Sands. Councillor Sue, Councillor Catchpole.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment, really. Do we need to review the committee, also the panel, as a consequence of the elections, like we will have to for the...
Yes, de facto membership will be as a result of those appointed to the Police and Crime panel, which will be affected by the political proportionality and so on. And yes, that will then cascade into the membership of this panel. And I think it's important for the democratic services and those, group leaders after the election looking to put people on who've got an interest in, obviously, in the type of work that we do. And I think I would find it difficult to think that any councillor elected to represent the public wouldn't have an interest in protecting them and keeping them safe and keeping them free from scams and crime, etc. So, it ought to be, they're knocking our door down trying to get onto this, but we'll see.
I just didn't know if it needed to be on the forward work programme.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Becky, if you would have
I haven't spoken for a while, sorry. I was going to suggest that the panel might want to take on board the request from the Adult Social Care and Public Health Select Committee. And if they're happy, I'm more than willing to have conversations with colleagues about how to take those items forward in an appropriate way so that they can be brought back for scrutiny. The panel has previously said about the Winter of Action, about that full evaluation, so it does feed into the last discussion. And just to say, Councillor Catchpole, obviously the next time that this committee meets, it will be in its reformulated yeah, it will be reformulated, and there is a plan that we've got to work with potentially new members to ensure that everybody's sort of fully engaged with the terms of reference and the remit of the panel.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So with that, I thank everyone for your attendance today. Thank you, colleagues, for your professional input and advice. This could well be my last meeting chairing at County Hall, so thank you all for your indulgence with me over the period of the last 12 months or so. Thank you all very much anyway. Meeting closed.